intern at the Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi. I extend a warm welcome to all to today's ICSS Wednesday seminar. Our topic for today is New Frontiers in China's Military Organization. Today's seminar examines the PLA's recent reorganization through the creation of its information support, cyberspace, and military aerospace forces. These new units reflect China's attempt to strengthen its hold over key strategic domains in modern warfare. At the same time, the PLA continues to face familiar challenges, integrating its services, managing technology and resources, and preparing personnel for information heavy operations. The ongoing upgrades in the aerospace force also point to China's ambitions in the space and missile arenas, even as issues like maintenance and corruption continue to affect overall effectiveness. These developments together shape the evolving landscape of China's military organization, and this is what we'll be exploring today. Our speaker today is Ms. Anushka Saxena, Staff Research Analyst with the Indo-Pacific Studies Programme at the Takshashila Institution, Bengaluru. She is also a doctoral research scholar at the Manipal Institute of Social Sciences, Manipal Academy of Higher Education. Her research focuses on the Chinese People's Liberation Army and its reforms, China-Taiwan relations, and India's foreign policy. She has written for The Hindu, The Times of India, and The Indian Express, and she curates the weekly newsletter Eye on China. Chairing the session is Mr. M. V Rappai, a Delhi-based security analyst specializing in Asian strategic issues. He has previously served with the Ministry of Defense and later as a research fellow at MP-IDSA from 1996 to 2002. He is currently associated with the Institute of Chinese Studies and has published widely in journals, books, and newspapers. He holds a postgraduate diploma in Chinese language from the School of Foreign Languages, New Delhi. His work covers China's security strategy, the Communist Party of China, the Chinese armed forces, and India-China relations. Before I hand over to the chair, I would like to remind all participants of a few housekeeping rules. All participants shall remain muted during the seminar. Questions may be posted in the chat box along with your name and affiliation. Alternatively, you may use the raise your hand option during the interactive session, after which you will be invited to unmute yourself. Thank you. With that, I now hand over to the chair. Over to you, Mr. Rappai.
Yeah, thank you, Harita, and all the people at ICS who are doing all the job. Yeah. So, good afternoon to everybody. Because the Institute of Chinese Studies Wednesday program, I think I'm thankful to the director and other people who are organizing this. Anushka, I will only introduce because she has already been formally introduced. I have seen her work, and that is how I come in contact with her. Because there are very few people who follow PLA as closely as she do, to my knowledge, in India. The problem with PLA, you see, when I started doing the research, the materials were very few and it is very difficult to get through. We used to get in the Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis, the papers from MEA, that also came much later. Then I started somehow following the PLA daily, the People's Liberation Army daily. And I found that, you see, some of the things, because even now, I have to say that the Chinese only publish in English what they want to publish. The other things are still, by and large, some of them are available in the Chinese language sources. Others, of course, I don't have to explain, so I will not get into that. But one thing, the organization part, we will be hearing more from Anushka. And I also look forward to what she has to bring to. But the things which I don't want to give a few long lecture and Anushka will present the paper, but only few opening remarks as it is, if we look at the development of Chinese military and evolvement of its organizations, I think the first jolt for the Chinese PLA was their confrontation with Russia and Vietnam. That given rise to a lot of questions for them because they had at that time large number of military people. And after Deng Xiaoping came into picture, the few things I want to mention is PLA is a unique organization in the national structure of China because PLA belongs to party. PLA is not belong to the Chinese state. So they have a relation. PLA also can be the last resort for protecting the interests of the party. So it is obvious where their interests lie. And another fact, which I think I have seen, they have a system which follows. It may be of course, now they have resources. They have no dearth of resources. Earlier, it was still their budget used to. There maybe it is not easy to calculate the budget, but in IDSA we had a program to understand and calculate the budget of PLA. But PLA budget, I think always it was around 3 to 5%. I don't think it any time exceeded 5% of the Chinese annual budget. But the advantage is PLA's organization at the grassroots give them a lot of leeway, which allows them, because all the provinces, that is where the party structure comes. All the party secretaries at the provincial level is also a political commissar to PLA for that particular unit or the particular province. So this gives them a lot of context, for example, Xi Jinping started his work as the secretary to Kang Piao, the then defense minister, at the CMC. So that has given him a lot of advantage. He knows almost the old generation, and of course, later on, he himself was instrumental in promoting the generals. But now, of course, as a lot of crisis is undergoing, but I don't think that is affecting their overall work. Because interestingly, I think last week, I think some of you might have noticed a news item. One of the units of the Chinese military, because I don't know which military or the intelligence, they haven't identified. They purchased an insurance company in America, which was looking after the insurance policies of all the FBI and CIA agents moving out or working there. So I think that explains a lot about their capabilities in the following their friends and enemies. So another aspect is after the 1991, we saw the Chinese army. I think till that time it is very difficult organization, but they started following the Gulf War. That was the first war, to my knowledge, which started covering not of as we can think about today, but initially, even in India, television sets were few and far. But at least the news coverage, and then later on, now we will listen from Anushka more about how the cyber security and cyber issues have become more. And I think one last part I think I will add, that is the how they are following the changes in the field of war. The immediate reason for I think the recent changes, apart from their military organization and organization structure, it is the hybrid war. which Ukraine and other places we saw, the use of drones. And this has wider implications for two reasons. Because after all, drones are not very high technology in all its aspects. But it can also be cheap, but also it needs a lot of support, technological support. The last thing I think we heard, the Google chief was talking yesterday. Don't put all our eggs in the AI basket. It may go wrong. I think I will stop with these words and hand over to Anushka. So you have 30 to 35 minutes and you are free. Okay, thank you, Anushka.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. It was lovely to hear from you, and you've set the stage rather beautifully. And of course, all of the things that you've talked about, China drawing its lessons from the revolution in military affairs, from other countries' wars, the development of their military industrial complexes, and the duplication of that model. All of these come together. In explaining some of the changes that we see in military organization today. And of course, what I want to talk about specifically today is are the three new support arms that have been created in the People's Liberation Army ecosystem: the Information Support Force, the Cyberspace Force, and the Military Aerospace Force, or just the Aerospace Force. And I hope my presentation, my slides are visible to everyone. I just want to take a minute to say thank you so much to Professor Acharya, Sheetal, Snigna, and the team at ICS for this opportunity, and to Rappai sir for, like I said, setting the stage so wonderfully. So let's start by let me start by taking you back to 2012, when not Xi Jinping but Hu Jintao is presenting his report to the 18th Party Congress in November 2012, if I'm not wrong, 28th November 2012. And and in his report, he's articulating what it means to be fighting wars in the conditions of informatization. So he's saying we should make active planning for the use of military forces in peacetime, expand and intensify military preparedness, enhance the capability to accomplish a wide range of military tasks, but do all of this in the bid or with the goal to win a local war in the conditions of informatization or in the information age. Now, the ideas of informatization aren't necessarily accredited to Hu Jintao, but the formalization of the idea that planning for a war that is centered on a system that is seamlessly interlinked with information at its core is essential to fight new age warfares and to win new age warfares. Of course, local wars are only one aspect of the mandate of the PLA, or the mandate of what the PLA is required to prepare for. There are also high intensity wars, and there are also short duration wars. So essentially, the PLA is preparing to fight and win localized, short duration, and high intensity wars in the conditions of informatization or the information age. So this essentially gives you a little bit of an insight into the thinking of the leadership as they approach the reform and the modernization of the PLA, and they do so in a bid to make it a world-class fighting force, or a force that is capable of winning, quote unquote, new age warfares. In this session in particular, our goal would be to understand how these three new support units or these forces are essentially just the latest leg in that endeavor from Hu Jintao to Xi Jinping to bring the PLA into this information age of battle. At Takshashila, we have a tradition that whenever we do a presentation, we start with something called RBF, or reverse Bollywood format. So just like a 3-hour Bollywood movie keeps stretching some event or something till the end, when you may or may not get a climax, we believe that we should start with the climax, and we should start with the main crux or the key conclusions up front. So here they are on your screen. So the paper that I based this presentation on essentially finds that the PLA's three latest support forces are reformed and specialized units that are created to establish the military's dominance over the three strategic commanding heights of new age warfare. But they bring with themselves three key opportunities and challenges. One pertains to their existing a unified force structure which drives offensive capability and risk, there being persistent integration and adaptation challenges, and there being a momentum in which essentially meets some degree of institutional fragility. If I can elaborate a little bit on each of these points, see, on the first point of there being a unified force structure which drives offensive capability but also risks, the restructuring of the cyberspace and information support forces essentially centralizes offensive cyber, electromagnetic, and informational capabilities and expertise. It potentially streamlines tactics on that front and enhances operational sophistication. But at the same time, it likely also heightens the risk of unintended escalation and demands careful differentiation between peacetime and wartime activities. Then, on persistent integration with the challenges of adaptation, despite the reorganization, which effectively does bring in some degree of unity and sophistication, the PLA continues to face persistent challenges, which in terms of integrating diverse services and theaters, and technological obsolescence, resource management, personnel adaptability, personnel and talent training. All of these remain key vulnerabilities, of course, in many militaries, but specifically in the PLA, and especially and these things are observed especially when it comes to network centric operations or operations where there is high stress in the combat environments. And finally, on momentum meeting fragility, if you look at some of the institutions like the aerospace force, and we'll go into the depths and details of each of these forces, their modernization underscores China's ambition to make new age battle fighting a reality, to counter the US capabilities in space or missile domains. But there will be on where there will be issues with maintenance of equipment, infrastructure protection, and of course corruption, which can plague force credibility and operational effectiveness and expose the forces to both internal and external pressures. So to conclude this RBF, essentially there's both a momentum and some degree of fragility and some continuing issues, and both of them have to be taken into account even as we assess what these forces have been up to in the past year and a half. And the forces were created with the disbandment of the PLA Strategic Support Force, which was at the time one of two support arms of the PLA. So four services, two support arms. The four services are the Air Force, Army, Navy, and the missile force or the rocket force. And the two support arms in April 2024 were the PLA Joint Logistics Support Force and the PLA Strategic Support Force. And today we still have four services, but we also have four support arms. So the Joint Logistics Support Force is still there, but the SSF has been disbanded, and now we have these three new support forces. So it's been a year and a half since they've come into existence. And in this presentation, I'd like to take you through each of their endeavors in the past year and a half, but also maybe start by talking a little bit about the speculation on why SSF may have disbanded. Of course, there are no real answers to this officially, as it were, but it's always fun to kind of think through some of these things, right? So so look, the SSF's responsibility was to essentially unify PLA tactics, operational principles, and strategic guidelines on fighting new age warfare. And I talked about new age warfare in the context of three new commanding heights of warfare, right? So that's the information domain, the cyber domain, and the aerospace domain. And there was clearly something that was happening with the SSF that required it to be disbanded. And there are some scholars out there that have rubbished the theory that the SSF was disbanded because it was supposed to just be a temporary force that was created in 2016, and eventually it was indeed going to be broken into its individual components. And I tend to agree with that assertion, right? There could be other reasons that pertain to inefficiencies in the SSF's mandate and functioning, or in its end goals that may have led to such a disbandment, right? So firstly, if you look at the three new established forces, what are the domains that they focus on? They focus on intelligence, technical reconnaissance, electronic countermeasures, cyber offense and defense, and psychological warfare. And if you look at the complete organogram, initially when it was the SSF, it was answerable to the Central Military Commission, which is the highest decision making defense decision making body in China. And then eventually it instructed theaters and other services on aspects of these cyber and intelligence related domains, right? But now, if you look at the new forces, they are directly in their own individual capacities reporting to the CMC. So it seems like with the breakup, the first goal of the CMC was to bring under its direct control each of these aspects of war fighting, given how important they are, right? If you go back to the text of the 2019 white paper on China's national defense in the new era, it identifies these domains like information space, cyberspace as key emerging security domains and three strategic commanding heights. And so so that just speaks to the doctrinal importance of these three domains in war fighting for the PLA. And in a context where the international environment is becoming increasingly hostile, if you're sitting in Beijing, there is great power competition, there is an abundance of cybersecurity threats, some posed by China, some posed to China. You need forces like the ISF, the CSF, and the ASF to be able to gear the PLA as a whole toward these multi-domain combat capabilities, right? The principles of systems warfare, multi-domain integrated joint operations, informatization and intelligentization, all of these have aspects of information, cyber, and aerospace, and vice versa. Information, cyber, and aerospace have aspects of systems warfare or intelligentization. And given their importance in new age battle from Beijing's perspective, you need them to be individual forces that can answer directly to the CMC instead of having a middleman in the form of the SSF commander and the SSF political commissar, right? Because the SSF under it had a space systems department and a network systems department. The cyber force came out of the network systems department, the aerospace force came out of the space systems department, and the information support force is a new entity. So instead of these departments functioning under a commander and a political commissar in the SSF, it is likely some of the thinking in the CMC could have been that you need individual forces that can directly tell Xi Jinping and tell Zhang Yuxia and others that this is what we're up to and this is our goal for each of these three strategic commanding heights of new age warfare, right? And if you look at this organogram, this is a non-exhaustive organogram of information and intelligence and network centric units in the PLA and the CMC. So there are a lot of units that have some of these mandates that pertain to intelligence, electromagnetic operations, or cyber offense and defense. For example, in under the army, in each of the theater commands, there are command and control brigades, there are electronic warfare and countermeasures brigades, there are intelligence and reconnaissance brigades, then there are joint command centers under each of the theaters as well as under the CMC, right? Which and these joint command centers are like thinking units, right? The nervous system and the brain, where simulation, tabletop exercises, tactics, they're all ironed out and figured out, right? So a lot of these entities have informational mandates. So there can also be overlap of functions given the complex organogram of the PLA. So again, these forces are a better alternative than a singular force like the SSF to individually iron out the three important domains in new age battle, and then eventually instruct some of these other similarly mandated units in the PLA to be geared towards a certain goal, to fight a certain kind of battle, and to prepare in a certain way, right? And now, if you further look at the breakup of the cyberspace, the aerospace, and the information support forces, they have now constructed individual brigades that are attached with the theater commands and eventually support the theater leadership or the leadership of the grassroots and gears them towards some of these functions, right? Then one of the other reasons why perhaps the SSF could have had issues and was needed to be disbanded was that if you look at how the SSF came into being, or what the kind of above the neck reforms that took place in the PLA in the 2015 and 2016 period, you see that a lot of institutions of the Central Military Commission are being disbanded. The four general departments of the CMC have been broken down into 15 commissions, offices, and departments, and some of their goals and mandates also pertain to information, cyber, intelligence, and reconnaissance. Right. So the SSF was created as an individual unit to bring a lot of those things together, on aspects of cyberspace and information warfare. But the main problem with the CMC and its general departments for that, and some political entity remarked that they were becoming individual fiefdoms. So you understand a fief, right? There is an overlord and there are tenants that are tilling the soil under him. So the general departments became all too powerful. They became fiefdoms, so they were broken down into many small departments. So and this was also because the general departments had become very siloed and isolated in their approach to a lot of the things, and that was making jointness very difficult. So it is possible that the SSF was suffering with a similar problem, where there was siloing or isolation of the network system and the space systems department, and eventually it became difficult to really chart out a joint doctrine on the cyber, information, and space fronts. So making three individual units and then them having a doctrine for all other units, on the information front or the cyber front or the space front, perhaps could have made better sense than having an SSF and still seeing the SSF have its departments siloed and isolated, right? And then finally, it could be that the SSF was unable to achieve its efficiency and jointness related goals, and there could be potential aspects of corruption, vulnerabilities in equipment, vulnerabilities in weapons upgrades, vulnerabilities in the bidding and the equipment procurement process that potentially meant that the SSF's house wasn't in order. Now, was that push big enough to restructure the SSF as a whole? Maybe not, but these are always, for the lack of a better phrase, cherries on top of a cake. If you already planned to restructure the SSF and there was a good reason to do that, some of these vulnerabilities and inefficiencies would do the trick, right? And for a long time, Zhu Qiancheng, who was the commander of the PLA SSF, was missing, and him being corrupt or disappeared from public eye for whatever reason wouldn't, of course, again be reason enough for the SSF to be restructured. But the investigations could have revealed something deeper, meaning that the SSF's house wasn't in order, and then there had to be a push on making the force and the agenda of the force more efficient. Now, let's proceed to discussing the individual units as a whole. Let's start with a discussion on the Information Support Force, which is a relatively newer force and doesn't have a lot of linkage with any of the departments of the SSF, but of course there are precedents to information warfare units in the PLA. So when the ISF and the SSF and the CSF and the ASF were being born in April of 2024, an article in the PLA Daily explained why there was a need to focus on information in warfighting. So the article argued that network information technology has become the quote unquote greatest variable in contemporary battlefield developments, and it is an important new source of combat power for the armed forces. Now, and as Rappai sir mentioned, if this is a country and a military force that's looking at Operation Desert Storm in 1991 and realizing that those handheld GPS-enabled devices in the U.S. armed forces are a revolution in military affairs, precision targeting of Yugoslavia in 1999, the Belgrade attack, all of them are their technological evolutions in the military, then it's eventually going to keep studying what other militaries and other battlefields are looking like and doing to be able to evolve itself. So, in the past few years, the PLA and its analysts and its units are realizing that network information technology, interlinking of different weapon systems, ground-based air defense, fighters, missiles, and other weapon systems, linking all of them through a singular battlefield network into one system or one entity is the future of warfare. This is what they're realizing, and so they need to coordinate and construct and apply all of these principles and their learnings in the form of a new force for the PLA, and they need to build the PLA as a high quality force. They need to enable it to win modern wars, and for all of that, they need a force like the ISF. Now, if you look at the ISF's mandate, and this is something that Xi Jinping articulated in one of his speeches at the Bai building in Beijing, where he said that there are four musts for the ISF to follow. The first must pertains to people, polity, and professionalism, which essentially means that the ISF must uphold the party's absolute leadership. Now, this is not new, but equally important. It must comprehensively plan the military's overall core setup, maintain basic operational principles, enhance mission awareness, and cultivate an excellent and high quality style, right? And it must also build strong organization. So essentially all of this would mean that do not waver in your commitments to political discipline and loyalty. Settle out the hierarchy, have clearer roles for grassroots officers, have a clearer national defense mobilization plan, be thorough with your tactics and principles. What does an anti-air raid mean? What do submarine operations mean? Because the PLA has a long list of campaigns, right? Objective-based campaigns that it undertakes or prepares to undertake. So the ISF should absolutely be clear on its basics and should have an excellent style and form. It should absolutely be loyal, pure, and reliable. These are Xi Jinping's words. Then the second must pertains to resources and strategy. So the ISF must focus on supporting combat, strengthening the use of information technology, joint operation systems. It should enable the fusion of civil and military, so on and so forth, right? And then the third must pertains to technological front-footedness, which is essentially that the ISF must be driven by innovation. So it must consistently experiment with new technologies, new ways of fighting systems of systems conflicts, and it should build some core combat capabilities which are unique to the ISF and aren't just a copy of, say, Russia or the US. And then eventually those core combat capabilities should be taught to the theaters and the services so that they can use them and maybe gain some asymmetric advantages in conflict. And finally, there is a fourth must which pertains to standardized governance and team building. Now, we know that there is the idea of a rules based or a law based governance in the military, or a rule of law in the military, and that essentially is the core crux of the standardized governance in the ISF. So you should effectively manage the forces and equipment. You should have a standardized management system to avoid ad hocism, and you should preserve team discipline, team quality, team supervision. So there are distinct guidelines on how to supervise exercises and formations and equipment. You should be clear and thorough on all of those. And then eventually, some of the kind of statistical or quantitative pushes for what the ISF should learn to do or should be able to do comes from another study that was published in a Chinese magazine, or a magazine based out of Hong Kong, if I'm not wrong, which argued that empirical studies show that traditionally manually controlled command systems, commanders expended 85% of their time on information processing, leaving only 15% for operational decision making. Now, if you are able, if say the PLA or any other military in the world is able to integrate command information systems into the network architectures, which is essentially a process ability to process information quickly, ability to sort out meaningless information from meaningful information, then commanders can devote 85% of their time on creative decision oriented tasks, and that would improve command efficiency as well. So for a force that is huge like the PLA, you need commanders to be on put their best foot forward, as it were, at the right time to be able to resolve crises. But if they're only dealing with information and then setting up the C2 or the C4 ISR or the C5 ISR today, then how will you ever be technologically front footed? So that kind of further explains why you need the ISF. Then this is the flag of the information support force. It's always interesting to see the symbolism on some of these. And each of the three new forces flag deploys a little bit of a different vexillology. So here you see the golden stripes, which present honor and mission. The top half is the same, and it shows 8 and 1, which is the anniversary of the founding of the PLA, 1st August 1927. And the PLA, the PRC star, but on the bottom you see golden stripes, which presents honor and mission. And then the purple color is specified by the Chinese affairs commentators as quantum purple, which refers to seizing the information high ground. And if you look at vexillology across the board, purple stands for jointness as well, right? If you look at some of the coverage that came out on India's new purple troops in the making, and this came out in April this year. It essentially pertained to newly trained troops that are newly trained in joint skills and joint operations. And then even the US Wright Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, as a commentator or a scholar from that base argued that purple in military jargon means joint, right? So that could be another aspect as to why quantum purple was chosen for in the information force, especially considering the information force has to be at the center of the nervous system in the context of a systems of systems conflict. Then there has been inspection of the ISF. So inspection, educational institutions, formations and equipment. These are all nitty gritty of any force that give you a deeper insight into what kind of a force is in the making and what their mandates are. So when they were inspected, if I'm not wrong, sometime in late 2024, December 2024, Xi Jinping had talked about how there is a need for the force to resolve issues of ideology, deepen ideological rectification, strictly enforce and conduct discipline and anti-corruption, and enhance the leadership, organizational, and executive power of the party organizations. So a lot of what is being talked about during the inspection doesn't necessarily pertain to the technicalities of the mandate of the ISF, but about how it needs to be more innovative, have a pioneering spirit, but also be ideologically pure and loyal. And then there is some bit about doing whole chain construction of the military, which essentially pertains to a comprehensive and integrated effort of war fighting, develop innovative models for talent cultivation, so on and so forth, right? So Xi Jinping is telling them to be pure and loyal, but also to be high quality and specialized in their endeavors. And then, of course, there are some educational institutions which speak to the quality of how the ISF is kind of training its troops and what it is aiming for. So, one, there is a PLA Information Support Force Engineering University or College, which is specifically created for the ISF. This university has established 7 national and provincial level key laboratories. So some of these key laboratories are where the interesting and innovative stuff happens, right? And this is one of the first kind of universities to or one of the first military academies to enroll and train master students in military sciences. So talk about innovative models of developing a specialized core, right? They're actively integrating civilian master students, maybe from STEM fields, and training them in the art of military science to enhance R&D on the information or informatization front, right? And in fact, one of these provincial level laboratories also won the Advanced Unit for Learning and Talent Development Award within the entire PLA. So they're doing some cutting edge work. The university also focuses on novel domains of training and new quality areas of teaching. This is usually done in the form of 10 undergraduate majors like communications, optoelectronics, information science and engineering, data link engineering, electromagnetic engineering, so on and so forth, right? And there are 6 disciplinary or rather interdisciplinary clusters also, which focus on specialized aspects of informational warfighting. These are data intelligence and cloud computing, network science, command and control systems, software engineering, so on and so forth, right? So together they form kind of a new disciplinary structure led by network information technology that covers a full range of information and cyber fields, right? And just the meat of the matter as to what the ISF has been up to in terms of demonstration of capabilities, right? There have been 3 major military exercises that have been able to track, and they speak to in three different aspects of what the ISF is experimenting with in terms of preparedness and equipment. So one was conducted in May this year, then July, and then August, and I'll quickly go through each of them before we talk about the cyber and aerospace forces. So this is the one in July, right? Now, if you look at the reportage of any military exercise, and please don't let anyone tell you that Chinese military thinking or military exercises are non-accessible. They actually very much so are, and many a times these exercises do stage setting or scene setting, which speaks to what were the aspects under consideration, what were the forces up to, what were the tasks that they were required to fulfill during the exercise. Because for a force that hasn't been in formal warfare or prolonged warfare or conflict since 1979, the only way they can bridge the gaps in their capabilities is through these preparedness exercises and combat training endeavors, right? So these exercises become very important, and this way they do the scene setting is crucial to know what were the elements or the tasks of that exercise. And these exercises almost always also conclude with a with a section or a segment on assessment, supervision and assessment, where they essentially figure out whether the components of the exercise were a success or a failure. So if you look at this January 2025 exercise, the scene that they set for this exercise is that they say, in the skies, drones accompany helicopter formations, opening aerial signal channels. At sea, support boats sail alongside warships, and near the shore, multiple types of equipment operate efficiently, setting up stable frequency bands for logistics transport groups. So what they're essentially saying is that there is a land component to this, a naval component to this, and an aerial component to this, and this is going to be a joint endeavor with the information support forces, network centricity, network linkage at the center of all of this. So they're demonstrating network centricity for a host of services: land, naval, and aerial. Now there are different combat groups, and all of them have a detachment or a brigade of the information support force that is integrated with them. And now the goal of the information support force is to ensure that if something happens on the aerial front, it's immediately communicated to the naval or the ground forces, and vice versa, right? So the brigades and the units that are attached to each of these services have a role to have absolute smoothness in the network integration. And during the drill, you see that all of these task groups penetrate into enemy positions. The network information detachments use drones to provide regional signal coverage. They employ something that the exercise report refers to as new portable equipment to relay battlefield information. And these portable equipment could be informatized radios or battle link devices, and they basically successfully complete the training task, where there had to be smooth interplay and smooth kind of sharing of communications and information. And there was, per usual, a post drill review, and in that review it was concluded that something that they referred to as a cloud based review and consultation mechanism was successful. So this mechanism could essentially pertain to a joint data repository, where each of the the network information detachments were uploading certain data or sharing certain information, and then it was communicated through that singular cloud to which everyone was logged in and plugged in. across services, right? So this is an excellent example of how network centricity could kind of ensure jointness across land, air, and naval warfare, right? Then there is also nighttime exercise in this report, which talks about uh, the use of a battle link or an all domain global network, which is essentially used to mitigate electromagnetic interference from the enemy. We don't know much about whether this exercise was a success or a failure, but we do know that they're referring to their joint cloud or their joint battle link as an all domain or global network. So next time you see this phrasing, you'll know that this is something that the ISF has been working with. Then eventually the May exercise has a similar state setting. This one revolves around the ISF's role in repairing equipment because of enemy artillery harassment. So they say that there is somewhere that there is military that needs to be fixed, and that fixing has to be done under the protection of the information support force, because the equipment was going through battlefield testing. They were caught by enemy artillery fire, and now the ISF has the role of fixing them. Now there are two main takeaways from the report of this exercise, right? One is that they say that the ISF is working with a proprietary camouflage device that apparently hides military grade construction machinery when it is engaged in repair operations, especially when aerial view is deployed using a drone. Now, and this is something I talk about in the paper as well. Speculatively, this camouflage device could be something like a disruptive pattern tarpaulin or a self-adaptive photochromism mechanism, which essentially refers to a synthetic material that that deploys color switchability at the molecular level. And what that essentially does is that it whenever it covers something, any equipment, it will essentially blend in with the surroundings, and it will give a camouflage or a chameleon like effect to protect any equipment. So let's say you were operating a tank, and the tank was caught under artillery fire, and you need to fix it or you need to move it. If you have this self-adaptive photochromism element or disruptive pattern tarpaulin, what it essentially does is that it enables the entity to blend into the surroundings, and then personnel can eventually act on it. And then there was a second proprietary mechanism that the ISF talks about, which is a device or a software that fixes malfunctions in construction machinery. Now, this could be affiliated with wiring, but we cannot say for sure because there is no official reportage. And then there is a third and final exercise in August, which talks about how the ISF is experimenting with an innovation, talent incubation, and application model. So it does excellent top-notch R&D. It incubates talent or trains talent on that front, and then it applies those results in battle. And essentially, a lot of the reportage in this exercise is virtue signaling, but it speaks just a little bit to what analysts or reporters think the ISF's capabilities are, right? So they say things like the moment a USB drive is inserted, it can implant a multi-layer camouflage Trojan virus. Once activated, within seconds, it can paralyze the entire system. So it builds a great cyber wall of electronic defense, right? It can do data bombardments. It can etch tunnels or backdoors onto chips. So these are things that the report is telling you as to the and eventually it's speaking to you about the capabilities the ISF is working towards, right? And it's not necessary that you take these at face value, but even if you take these as the base layer of capabilities the ISF is working with, stuff like building a firewall, using Trojan viruses, you know that the ISF will be the institution responsible in case some of these are used in the world, right? Then I
Yeah,
think yeah, we'll skip.
yeah, you can come to the concluding part.
Yeah,
You-
yeah, yeah. Just a little bit about the cyberspace force, right? And I believe if I take time till 4, would that be okay? Just the next 8 minutes. Yeah. If you look at the mandate of the cyberspace force, which is again interesting, Wu Qian, who's the spokesperson of the Ministry of Defense, when he's announcing what 3 new forces are meant to do in April 2024, he says that cybersecurity is a global challenge and also a severe security threat that China faces. So the cyberspace force will vigorously enhance cybersecurity defense measures, which are significant for strengthening the country's cyber border defenses. So essentially, he's speaking to the need for a cybersecurity force to do both defense of the nation's cyberspace, but also or also engage in offensive cyber capabilities like cyber intrusions, or the Trojan virus example that we talked about, right? So again, an important function in the military domain from Beijing's perspective. This is the flag. The cyber gray speaks to cyberspace being an invisible battlefield. Then if you look at the proper articulation of the mandate of the cyberspace force, it's a professional technical arm designed to address complex battlefield of cyberspace. And the ISF, by contrast, is a strategic arm that provides support for coordinating and employing network and information systems. So a professional arm that addresses the challenges in cyberspace, and a support arm that brings different units and services together toward a joint goal. Like I said, the CSF was formed from the SSF's network systems department, and it has a lot of subordinate units that are specialized in a lot of domains. So it has research institutes that cover computer design, automation, signals intelligence, and cyber reconnaissance. It has technical reconnaissance bases that are attached with each of the 5 theater commands, and it has a general staff department, a political work department, a logistics department, and multiple military representative offices across important cities in China, right? So it has a wide reach and a wide coverage across the country. And if you look at its recruitment or how it's looking at talent, the CSF is unlikely to be open to non-military inductions like we saw with the NUDT ICT college with the ISF. They were indeed training master students in the civilian sectors, but the CSF is unlikely to do that. But the likely recruitment for civilian positions will be in some technical roles that would require specific R&D, but not necessarily in the military side of things. And if you look at the 2024 recruitment cycle for the cyberspace, and this just speaks to how sophisticated the force has to be, right? The recruitment notice says that we will only focus on double first class universities, which are the top notch, the top class universities of China, right? For induction into the cyberspace force. So the quality has to be absolutely immaculate. Then its main training university, like for the ISF, you had the NUDT ICT college. There is the Information Engineering University from the cyberspace. This was a specialized institution that first came about under the SSF, but now it is affiliated with the cyberspace force. And the only public demonstration that we've seen from the cyberspace force comes in the form of it comes during the September 3 military parade marking the 80th anniversary of China's war against Japanese aggression. And it shows some equipment that demonstrate integrated command and control, reconnaissance and sensing, and cyber electronic confrontation. And some of the entrepreneurs that are looking at these equipment and these exercises are commenting later on, and they are saying that that they have worked with the cyber force, they've brought this equipment to life, and this is a true example of civil military innovation. So a lot of civilian R&D and R&D of private sector firms like the 360 group is going into and is involved in the equipment of the cybersecurity forces. And finally, just wanted to conclude here by sharing assessments on both what we've discussed about the ISF and the CSF. As for the ISF, I think it is important to understand that even as the SSF left much to be desired in terms of seamless integration, the creation of an individual unit in the ISF doesn't necessarily mean that the inefficiencies of the SSF will be resolved. right? This is because network centricity, jointness, they have been bottlenecks in the past. They have been bottlenecks in the past as well. And it's not that network centricity is the only bottleneck to preparedness and sophistication. If you look at exercises that are conducted in the Yellow Sea in the Northern Theater Command, you will realize that submariners in the PLA Navy find it difficult to operate complex equipment, not because they're not trained in informational warfare, but because they're seasick and they're unable to operate in depths of the sea, right? Similarly, if you look at Western Theater Command exercises, and there's an exercise that I love going back to. It's an exercise where a drone unit is supposed to send high-tech gear and winter gear and food to some troops stationed in Tibet, right? And the drone unit is unable to reach them, and the pilots are unable to operate it because they're not able to control the rotor speed because the terrain is so complex. So even if you have an individual force that drafted a joint doctrine, it's not necessary that bottlenecks that pertain to talent training or pertain to inability to handle equipment will go away. So these are things that we need to remember. And this is my final bit on the assessment from the capabilities of the cyberspace force. Here I am a little bit more optimistic because there is no doubt that the creation of an individual cyberspace force will create intensive expertise on this front. As you saw, it has way too many specialized units, research institutes, and technical and reconnaissance bureaus under it. This specialization will inevitably offer more sophistication, and because in the past we have seen PLA affiliated cyber actors or advanced persistent threat actors like APT1, which is the PLA unit 61398. We have seen them in the past be responsible for critical attacks across India, the US, UK, Japan, Hong Kong, and many other countries, right? The creation of a new military oriented force only makes it more legitimate and sophisticated to be able to engage in these offensive attacks. I think the most important challenge the CSF would have to take into account would be that of unintended escalation, because cyber attacks often have cascading consequences and can be seen by other countries as acts of war. And so the CSF's main, I guess, hurdle and opportunity would be to differentiate between and train according to differences in peacetime and wartime. I'll end my presentation there and happy to take questions and comments. Rappai sir, we are not able to hear you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi.
Thank you, Anushka, because you've given a very nice overview of the capabilities and some of their drawbacks. Because any joint operation, it is not easy. Say in India, our armed forces are trying to. We have a lot of experiences, but it is not too easy to integrate. Uh, of course, it is not your uh, on this task also, because now beyond the PLA, how to interact with other agencies in China, doing some of the same work, and the space agency of China out there, it is also an entity. So in any of the units, it is not easy. But I think only I can say, even though I am not a very a technical person, but it's so far so good for them. You see, it is the way they are trying, and I don't know where they will reach. That is beyond. I may not be there, but anyway, I don't have to bother about that. But I think it is very interesting. You've given a lot of thought for the discussions. I hope we will get some of the very good questions. And I will only request you that you are keeping. I know it is not easy, but of course you have to complete your PhD also. So take the things in the stride and keep on doing the marvelous. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, Hairida, is there any questions in the chat box or anybody raised hands?
No questions have been posted as of now.
Yeah, I think, of course, for the people, it may be, unless somebody is trained in net-centric warfare or the cyberspace, it is not easy. But only I think for Anushka, I will say that the one of the advantage of China, when I, now past few years I haven't traveled, but when I travel to various places in China to attend the Sun Tzu Art of War the conferences, the integration or the ability of their people to interact, and some of the universities, I think in India we haven't learned those lessons. That is, sorry to say, or the generation which I belong failed to understand or convey that to the people, or may not be the right people is not picking up the required lessons. But the thing I wanted to say, it is the two unrelated to the topic we discussed. We also have to look at what they are doing, this huge database, how they are managing, and the capabilities of the people, how they are grooming the PLA soldiers. The PLA foot soldier, I cannot expect him to be a cyber expert or something, but
Right.
how the handheld equipments he can handle and give feedback to his concerned units or the people who are controlling them. I think that also gives an interesting thing. But I'm not sure where we will get all this information. Some of the information earlier, I don't know about the Takshashila, how the cybersecurity linked people, if they are working in the network, or how much willing they are to talk. Because the sad part is, you see, for example, it's a very minor issue. The arrest, the digital arrest. I think any of the police force would have tackled it with minimum equipment and minimum knowledge. But I think we have come to this far. Some of the old people doing their business in the routine have to think twice, signing any or touching any of the information about their bank accounts or things like that. So this it may be may not be the right example, but the task is very difficult. It is a thing which is the managing the database and the conveying your the keeping all the agencies pulled together. I think that will give a lot of advantage to the Chinese in learning their business because it is an ongoing task in the next 3-4 years. And lastly, I think somebody's want to talk. The Chang Yoshia is an interesting character. I don't know how much we can get the information and how much he is behind all this, the controlling the forces in Taiwan and other Taiwan states and other issues. So I think that is another topic we need to look at very carefully. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
One question.
Yeah. I'll take that from Dr. Mukhopadhyay. Thank you so much, sir. Could Anushka please speak a bit more on the joint exercises that the PLA is engaged in and efforts to build trust among neighboring defense forces? So, of course, we've seen a lot of.
I think you can do that after taking the question from Mukhopadhyay because you will get more time. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So that's the question from Dr. Mukhopadhyay.
Okay.
Yeah. So we know that with Russia and Belarus, it's largely the PLA ground forces that are conducting joint exercises, and there are some airdrop and air raid campaigns that we've recently seen in Belarus. So helicopters from both the armed forces coming in, doing a land drop exercise, then even together engaging in firepower against a particular enemy line of firepower or something like that. But I think at this stage, I would just like to give an example from what China said about Operation Sindoor, and how some of the joint exercises with Pakistan are example. I think the example is the Shaheen exercise that has happened in the past few years, that has eventually led to Pakistan's quote unquote success during Operation Sindoor. And these are China's words, not mine. So I think this really speaks to Chinese perceptions of how jointness with its neighbors is eventually is eventually a result of some of these exercises that it does. For example, Shaheen, and how then the neighbors learn and use it in their eventual campaigns. Now, obviously, we Belarus hasn't had the opportunity yet, and Russia is far too big a defense power for the Chinese to be able to say that it is a result of the jointness that Russia's campaigns have been successful. But with Pakistan, I think this is an interesting example, right? So the Chinese published articles after Operation Sindoor, and they called Pakistan's air offensives a success that have been made possible by the Shaheen, the practicing of jointness in the Shaheen. So they say that the Pakistanis were a force that only focused on short visual range operations. They didn't have a culture of ground based air defense, but it is because the Chinese taught them to fight in a systems warfare configuration, that they were able to learn beyond visual range. And that is how they eventually whatever were successful in doing whatever they did, and quote successful again in quotes. So the Chinese publish an article, and there is an entity which is hilariously funny but also famous on Weibo. They say that, look, if you think about it, the Rafai was better than the J10 in all aspects. And then they published this image on the right side of your screen, no, which is an image from the Rafai website where it says combat proven. So they say, look, the Rafai is better than J10. It's been in a conflict before. But the reason why Pakistan was able to quote unquote defeat the Indian Air Force was a result of integrated operations made possible by China's complete weapon system and data link sharing. So they give a theory as to how this happened, right? Let's assume that the Pakistanis were able to target one Rafai. So they say, they try to explain how they did it. So this is a graphic I made based on what the Chinese explained, right? They say that on the ground was a Chinese HQ-9P or an HQ-16, which is meant for ground-based air defense and for evasive maneuvers and missile attacks. Then there was a J-10C in the air, which had the PL-15 missile on board. And the PL-15 missile has a three-phase navigation system. It starts off with inertial navigation. Mid-course, it establishes a data link with an AWACS aircraft. And at the end, it has a active radar homing, so it can essentially lock in on the target on its own. So the Chinese are arguing that it is this combination of the J10's, J10CE's inertial navigation push, the HQ-16 on the ground, which was helping the PL-15 with evasive, because of its evasive maneuvers capabilities. Then an AWACS in between. The Chinese don't say the AWACS was there. Pakistanis use the Saab. But the PL-15E can establish that link with the Saab or with the AWACS of the Pakistanis easily, is the point that they're making. And then at the end, the PL-15 has a active radar homing in and of itself. So it's this Chinese missile, this Chinese ground-based air defense, this Chinese fighter jet, and the Chinese ability to interlink with other equipment that Pakistan has, that eventually led it to be quote unquote successful. So at least this is how I think we can think of the Chinese perceptions of whatever whatever it thinks it's imparting in terms of jointness to its neighbors. And I think with Pakistan, we're just going to see this more often. Belarus is another, but those have largely pertained to ground-based operations and air raid campaigns or amphibious campaigns. But this is the one that I really found interesting in terms of how in terms of neighbors, especially China is looking at imparting jointness related training.
Yeah, Harita, can we get Abhishek? Is he available? If then he can raise the question.
There's another question from Hari Yadav as well.
Yeah.
He wanted to hear your understanding on ISF in maritime domain and how well it could support the PLA Navy in conducting the far seas operation.
So yeah, again, at least in terms of, and I talked about a few exercises, right? At least in terms of the exercises, we haven't necessarily seen the ISF have a naval component, except for this one exercise where both the Navy, the land, the not both, all three, the Navy, the land forces, and the air forces are jointly wanting to conduct a singular campaign, and the ISF has units attached with each of the three to be able to seamlessly communicate how the battlefield looks from an aerial perspective, from the naval perspective, and from the land perspective, and what each of the entities should do next so that a unified goal is achieved. But if you have to think of far seas operations, I think if you have some specialized units of the ISF on board a carrier battle group, and then as well as attached to naval air defense. So, for example, you're seeing the Fujian aircraft and the new you're seeing the Fujian aircraft carrier and the new aircraft that go on board the Fujian, right? At the J-15 T, for example. So if you have information support force capability aboard the J-15T as well as aboard the aircraft, the Fujian aircraft carrier, it will be easier for them to operate out of, say, an area like the Indian Ocean region or the Gulf of Aden, which will be as far seas as the Chinese are getting today. And then if they want to do a mine clearing operation together with a surface ship missile operation, or a naval based land attack or something like that, right? So the information support forces units can clearly communicate as to how the situation looks from the J-15T's perspective, and what the aircraft carrier should eventually do to, say, clear a mine, or to assess the justified location for a submarine or something like that, right? So it's essentially establishing communication and creating a system out of weapon systems that belong to different domains, so that they eventually come together to achieve a singular goal. And it can facilitate far seas operations between three different types of Chinese weapon systems. But will it be the game changer for China to become a maritime navy, from a maritime navy to a blue water far seas navy? I don't really think so. That is a question of political willingness, of capability, among other things. But if it is operating in the far seas, and a carrier has to coordinate with a J-15, and that has to operate with
Anushka.
on land, that is what the ISF can help with.
Yeah, Anushka, I will supplement what you said because it is interesting. The PLA Navy, even though sometimes we attribute, but if you look at their budget and capabilities, their area of operation is still around China or the immediate vicinity, maybe a lot of concentration on Taiwan and the nearby areas. But the question and the things you said, they have to manifold their budget and operational capabilities. I think that will be it's a task because I don't think they are going to get the American type of budgets anywhere near future. Yeah.
I agree, sir.
There's a follow-up by Partha Mukhopadhyay. He says, so nothing with immediate neighbors except Pakistan?
Sir, I don't think I've seen a report so far where there is a discussion on jointness between the Chinese and the Bangladeshi militaries, or something of a sort. And largely, these exercises is something that I've seen with Belarus, Russia, and Pakistan, especially in the context of some of the campaigns I talked about, which is systems integration or beyond visual range or things like that. But yeah, that just may be my limited reading. But yeah, not much beyond that.
Yeah, Partha, I think you know well our relations with Bangladesh. So, and it is it is an ongoing process. I don't think anybody will risk at this moment to get into a very close relation on these subjects, because these are very highly technical, and I am not underrating or undercalculating the capabilities of the Bangladeshi, but if you look at their immediate task, is much beyond, because Pakistan, of course, have their own interests in protecting and cooperating, and many other people around them, because are also looking at the capabilities Pakistan is picking up from China, but also at the same time, in what way they can counter or understand the China and Pakistan links. That is also equally important. And their relations in the Gulf region, that I think we need to look at little more seriously now.
If I may, I was just thinking about this, and essentially, a lot of things, if we expand the definition of joint and not necessarily jointly networked, a lot of things would count as joint operations, right? Even China and Vietnam conduct joint naval patrols. There are military operations that are jointly conducted by the military junta in Myanmar and the PLA to crack down on telecom fraud. But none of these are necessarily campaigns. They're just a way for the militaries or the navies on each side to know the best practices on the other side. But does this necessarily involve the kind of technology or the technical transfer of know-how that we've seen between China and Pakistan? Not so much.
There's another follow-up as well by Partha Mukhopadhyay. Uh, he says if he was wondering if Chinese PLA was attempting trust building with other ASEAN nations or even Africa.
Sir, there's an interesting example of this. We know that the Djibouti base is a hard base, but places like Riam in Cambodia, that is a classic soft basing strategy that China is deploying, right? And I'm sure, so you would know all about this. But there was an incident a few years ago where a Chinese warship came to the Riam naval base to help with the construction of that base, and the Cambodian government has always said it's just China investing in Cambodia's self-defense, and not necessarily, establishing a base or anything there. But then, after those vessels docked, for 4 months they didn't leave, and that is a classic maneuver that the Chinese refer to as, or is referred worldwide to as soft basing. Now, when they are based there, they're not necessarily being very mobile, but there might be some activity going on in terms of how equipment on board is taken care of, what are the kind of systems some of these frigates or corvettes that were docked there deploy, and whatever Cambodia might be learning from it, it might be learning from it, right? So same thing with the Great Cocoa Islands, where there are mobile radar stations that come aboard Chinese vessels. There are dual use scientific civilian ships that have been docking in Sri Lanka. Again, like I talked about, naval patrols with Vietnam. Uh, uh, I think some of these endeavors are definitely geared towards trust building and sharing of best practices. With Africa, I've largely seen the communication be in terms of weapon in terms of sale of weapons. In fact, I think 26% of the sales of some African countries on the West Coast, 26% of their arms come from China, second only to Russia. And countries like Algeria are buying a bunch of Wing Loom drones, or Rainbow series of Chinese drones. And the problem is also that Chinese state-owned enterprises have a profitability motive above and beyond the national ideological motives that they have, right? So they will sell to anyone. So their guns will also be found with the Three Brotherhood Alliance. Their guns will also be sold to the junta in Myanmar, and then both of those entities will fight with each other. Same in Africa, and in some of these other geographies, right? So with ASEAN, there are some interoperability exercises or some soft basing, but with Africa, it's largely a transactional relationship, is my large understanding in the context of your question.
Yeah, Anushka, you can answer Sriyan's Mohanty's question.
How
It
advanced are Chinese
looks,
AWACS? Yes, sir.
Do you want me to read it out for you?
Sure. How advanced are Chinese AWACS in terms of their ability to track low targets? Also, I have additional question with respect to cyber capabilities. Is the focus of the PLA cyber units primarily on espionage or intelligence preparation, or has it develop proven scalable capabilities for disruptive or destructive cyber attacks? Okay, so second question first. I think you will remember that in 2021, China disabled some power grids in the Ladakh region by virtue of a cyber attack. Eventually, then there was also a cyber attack in Mumbai, if I'm not wrong, and I'm 90% sure that that was also attributed to a Chinese advanced persistent threat actor, where the lights went off in some areas of the Mumbai city. And so, yes, I do have a belief that they have scalable capabilities that have disruptive consequences, and these often target uh, power grids, critical infrastructure, critical information infrastructure, so on and so forth. In India's context, you have other examples where Chinese-based APTs like Red Echo have, or APT-1, which is PLA Unit 61398, have targeted the databases of Air India or the Serum Institute of India or Bharat Biotech during the COVID-19 pandemic, which has led to the release of a lot of consumer information, but maybe potentially even critical or sensitive R&D revolving around vaccines, right? And a similar example is where Lazarus, which is a North Korean APT, targeted the Kurnakulam nuclear power plant a few years ago. And even though when the plant was first targeted, CERTIN, which is the Indian Computer Emergency Response Team, said that there has been no such attack. Next day, they acknowledged it and said that what was targeted was sensitive civilian nuclear information. So yes, the Chinese, and that was a North Korean actor, but some reading could inform you potentially that there are a lot of interoperability exchanges between Lazarus and some of the Chinese-based advanced persistent threat actors, or APTs, right? So yes, I do believe there is an endeavor towards scalability, and there have been exercises that have been really disruptive in the civilian domain. But and of course, do not forget examples of people like Su Bin, who for years were conducting espionage of the US fighter jet program. The documents that he targeted were the F-35 documents. So that isn't possible until and unless you have offensive capabilities. Tibetans based out of India constantly talked about malware operations that are conducted by the Chinese using email phishing attacks and spam attacks, right? So yeah, I do think there is a lot of scale and diversity to some of these, and they happen all across the world. They happen even in Pakistan. There was recently a known sec operation that was leaked, right? And Pakistan and North Korea and South Korea were among some of the target countries. As to the question on the KJ 500, and I'll answer this very quickly. I don't know how effective it is, but I do know that it's one of their latest. It also has buoys that can engage in bombing operations. It has a certified identification ability. It has been used in exercises for things like quick responsiveness, but as for the question of how to measure its efficacy, I don't know. But it's definitely China's most advanced. It has an ASA radar, so I'm bound to believe that in terms of observability and jamming, it would have pretty good applications.
Yeah, Anushka, thank you. I think
Thank
all
you.
the good things are to come to an end, and I think the time is the villain now.
Yes.
So
Thank you, sir.
uh, I think what you said it is correct. To my knowledge, AVAX is one is it is a new. It may not be the technology may not be new, but linking it with cyberspace and information and the available data analysis, it is a new game. Uh, so unless I know somebody from the Air Force, I don't think they will be talking now. But if they give more information, we are unable to get all that together. So thank you very much. I hope we will keep this going. We need to get you on some of the other aspects of PLA. The research you're doing is interesting. Keep on doing. All best wishes to you. And thanks to all the people who attended and listened to us. Thank you. Harida, now you can come and continue.
Thank you so much.
On behalf of the Institute of Chinese Studies, we sincerely thank Ms. Anushka Saxena for her insightful and thought-provoking talk and Mr. V Rappai for chairing today's discussion. We also thank all participants for joining us and engaging with the topic. We look forward to seeing you at our upcoming Wednesday seminar. Details are available on the ICS website, and you can subscribe to our newsletter for regular updates. Thank you once again and have a good evening.
Thank you all.